Hey guys, today we're going to look at the lymphatic system, and this is a system of organs and vessels that help to protect you against any organisms that might come into your body. Here are some of the functions of the lymphatic system that we're going to address as we go through and look at this. So as we look at the lymphatic system, this is going to be shown as green in your diagrams. Arteries usually are red, veins blue, and lymphatics green. A few things I want to point out to you. Here is the thymus gland. We saw a hormone called thymosin that is going to control lymphocyte maturation here in the thymus gland. Here is the spleen. The spleen is a organ close to the stomach, and the spleen is important because it is what breaks down red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, and so it's very important. You can kind of think of it as a red blood cell graveyard in essence. If you look at the intestines here, there are structures called lacteals that will be in the intestinal walls that'll absorb fat. Also lymph nodes, because the vessels carry lymph to the nodes and then it's filtered through the lymph nodes. So it filters, instead of the blood like the spleen does, it filters lymph. And we'll get to lymph in a minute, but that's fluid. And you have some lymph nodes then, and those are these little structures along the vessel. There'll be some fluid going in and out of the lymph node. And then I also want you to notice that there are these larger ducts. It goes all the way up, and then we see the thoracic duct go into the subclavian vein here on the left, and the right lymphatic duct is another one that's going to go into the right subclavian vein. Now, interstitial fluid and lymph are basically the same thing. Interstitial fluid is fluid between cells in a tissue, and the root inter means between. Intra means inside, but inter means between. It's similar in composition to blood plasma. It does not, though, contain blood cells or protein molecules. So this is similar to plasma, but it doesn't have blood cells and it doesn't have protein. Now, interstitial fluid and lymph are really the same thing. And this is going to be fluid that is absorbed into the lymph vessels and will go back into veins further on up into those subclavian veins. As we look at these lymph vessels, then we'll see there are capillaries and larger lymph vessels, and finally they go into those ducts I showed you, the thoracic duct and the right lymphatic duct. The right lymphatic duct drains the right arm, the right side of the chest, and the right side of the head. The left lymphatic duct, or what we call the thoracic duct, drains both of the lower extremities and also the left side of the chest and abdomen, and the left arm and the left side of the head. So this is going to be one that drains most of the fluid from your body. When we look at lymph nodes are going to contain lymph nodules, which in the middle of the lymph nodule are these structures we call germinal centers, and there are lymphocytes in there. As the lymph is coming through, if there are microorganisms, it's going to alert cells here in the germinal center of these follicles. There's a foreign invader, and those cells can then start dividing. And here's the efferent lymphatic vessels, which mean they're leaving the lymph node. The lymph node then is going to filter lymph as it comes through and back out into the vessels. Tonsils are similar to lymph nodes. They also help prevent pathogens from entering, but this time entering the respiratory tract. These tonsils then are found around your tongue and your throat regions. The three I want you to know are the palatine, which is located on the sides of the soft palate. You'll see that when you stick out your tongue and say ah, you see them on either side. The pharyngeal tonsils, also called the adenoids, are part of the upper throat, right behind the nasal cavity. And lingual means tongue. It's really on the back of the tongue, so it's not quite the picture you see here. But this picture of the palatine tonsils are what you would expect. And then the lingual tonsils a little farther back on the tongue. The spleen is a structure that will filter blood. So red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets are going to be disposed of here. There's also a thymus gland, and this is the one that is found in the chest region, really inferior to the thyroid gland that would sit right here. Thymosin does is it helps to mature these T lymphocytes that we'll look at later as we study the immune system. The function of the immune system is to protect the body from harmful substances, and that could be things like pathogens, allergens, even malignant cells. And immunity is the body's ability to resist infections from pathogens, foreign substances, and toxic chemicals. There's two kinds of immunity we're going to look at. One type of immunity is called humoral immunity. It's sometimes referred to as antibody-mediated immunity. This will involve the B lymphocytes and antibodies. The second type of immunity is called cellular immunity or cell-mediated immunity. This will involve T lymphocytes. When we go through this, then make sure you know humoral goes with B lymphocytes, cellular with T lymphocytes. Antigens are any substance that the body regards as being foreign. This may be substances like viruses, bacteria, toxins. It might even be transplanted organs because your body would see those as foreign. Non-specific defense mechanisms are those that you use to keep organisms out of your body. A good example of non-specific defense mechanism would be skin and mucous membranes. The mucous membranes have mucus which will trap these infectious agents, and also mucous membranes can contain antibodies and lysozyme. Lysozyme is a substance that is going to be in tears and in saliva, and it helps to keep bacteria from dividing. Also, we have mechanisms like sneezing and coughing. We have an acidic stomach that could kill bacteria. All of the things that keep bacteria from getting hold and getting into your body will be what we call non-specific immune defense. One at the bottom you see here, inflammation, is also a non-specific response to cellular injury. One of the substances I want you to know will be antibodies, or what we call immunoglobulins. And immunoglobulins are a type of globulin protein. Keep in mind the globulins are going to be one of the plasma proteins you want to know. We see the different immunoglobulins here. IgG is the most abundant antibody you have. This is the one that's going to help you fight against bacteria and viruses and fungi and other foreign particles. IgA is one that's important in immune functions of mucous membranes. This is one that is going to be found in saliva and tears, in sweat and breast milk. And I always remembered this one, mama, because A and mama, but IgA is in breast milk. And IgMs are circulating antibodies in body fluids, and these are increased in your initial exposure to an antigen. So when you're initially exposed, we see a rise in this type of antibody in your blood called IgMs, and then as it continues, you start fighting against that, you have more IgGs. IgDs are found only on B cells, those B lymphocytes that are important for antibody-mediated immunity or humoral immunity. And these are important in B cell activation. And then IgEs that are produced in lung, skin, and mucous membranes that are responsible for allergic reactions. So they kind of the ones that help to sensitize us to some of these allergens, and maybe we respond more forcefully than we should. Next, we're going to look at specific immune defense. And with specific immune defense, this is going to be the part of your immune system that can specifically target a certain pathogen coming into your body. So let's say it's the chickenpox virus, for instance, or a certain flu virus, or maybe a certain bacterium. Well, you have B cells and you have T cells that will specifically be able to identify those as foreign and cause you to be able to get rid of them. Another thing about this specific defense mechanism is at the end of it, you have memory. So those are the main things I'm going to have you learning in this, that there's two different types of these specific immune defense systems, and that you have memory when you get through. So keep that in mind as we go through this. Plasma cells are formed from B cells and then produce antibodies. So you want to know plasma cells are the ones that actually make those antibodies or immunoglobulins we just looked at. Helper T cells come from the thymus gland because they're T cells, thymus derived, and they bind with specific antigens that can be presented by big cells called macrophages. And what they do is they're going to stimulate cells to kill your own cells that have been infected. So what we're going to see is helper T cells are kind of the go-between between humoral immunity and cell-mediated immunity. They're going to activate both branches, and I'm going to show you a diagram of that in just a minute. Another type of T cell I want you to know is our killer T cell. When you're learning about these, and if you take anatomy and physiology, they're going to call them cytotoxic T cells. Another one I want you to know will be the memory cells, and the memory cells are going to stay behind in your body, and if you're exposed to the exact same pathogen again, quickly your immune system will react against it. That's why it's so good to get a flu shot. Whether or not you think it makes you sick, you may feel some response from it, but you have those memory cells left. And if you get the actual virus in your body, it's going to quickly get rid of it. You're not going to be sick for a week or two. Macrophages are large white blood cells. These are really monocytes that have changed in tissues, and they present parts of your antigen so that they can be recognized by T cells. And they're very crucial in order for your normal T cell response. Here's a good diagram of this. So we start out with an antigen. This will be the threat. This is your foreign antigen. And it will be engulfed by a macrophage when it detects that it's foreign. And then that macrophage will present this antigen, kind of show this antigen to this helper T cell. The helper T cell is then going to be able to divide and make many copies of itself. And as it divides, it's going to form memory helper T cells that stay in your body. The other thing that it does is it's going to divide and become what we call an effector helper T cell. It's activated and it's able to respond and start this whole cascade of immune response. When it is an effector helper T cell, it can activate both B cells and cytotoxic T cells. Those were those killer T cells. You see here naive, and what naive means is they haven't been exposed before to this foreign antigen. So they're just learning. They're naive. They're learning how to respond, how to recognize it. So the helper T cell helps them and activates them. They're then going to divide, and as that divides, some of these cells are going to become memory killer T cells or cytotoxic T cells. And others are going to become effector cytotoxic T cells. And what that means is they're going to go and defend you. They're going to go to your cells that are infected. The organism is already inside of your cells and it's dividing, and it causes the cell to die. So this is going to kill some of your cells, but it's going to get those cells that are infected to die and therefore keep those organisms from dividing inside. At the same time, these helper T cells are going to activate the antibody-mediated response. So while this is going on and your cells are being killed, not many, but some, the other response is occurring. When activated, those naive B cells are going to divide, and some of them, as they become activated, will become memory B cells. Some of them become plasma cells, and plasma cells produce antibodies. These antibodies then are secreted into your body fluids, and what they do is they're going to bind to pathogens or toxins that are outside of cells. And when they bind to these pathogens, they're going to disable them. So you can see that in the fluids of your body, we have antibodies that are disabling the pathogen. And so we have both arms of this. Very important that both of these occur. And what is the cell that activates both sides of your immune response? Did you guess helper T cells? If you did, that's correct. Next, I want us to look at natural and acquired immunities. Natural immunity is the immunity that we're born with, or what we call innate immunity. And it is inherited and permanent. It consists of anatomical barriers such as skin and cellular secretions like mucus and tears. So when we were looking at the non-specific defense mechanisms, that is that natural immunity we're talking about. Acquired immunity is also called adaptive immunity. Acquired immunity is that cell-mediated and antibody-mediated immunity I just described to you. This reaction occurs as a result of being exposed to some pathogen that comes into your body. And once it gets in, if it gets past the natural immunity barriers, then we now need our specific or acquired immunity. This is developed during your lifetime, so the longer you've been exposed, the better it is until you get older. And it can be passive or active. Passive acquired immunity is kind of borrowed immunity. It's acquired by injecting antibodies from the blood of other individuals or animals into a person's body to protect them against a disease. An example of this might be, say a person was bitten by a snake and they needed an antivenom. Well, the antivenom is actually antibodies that have been produced and they're injected into you. So you're borrowing this immunity. You're not producing these antibodies. You don't have memory to these antibodies. If you were bitten again, you would have to get another injection of antivenom. So it is a passive and an acquired immunity. Active acquired immunity is going to last longer than passive immunity, and a reason is because there are memory cells. The two types of active acquired immunity are naturally acquired immunity, and that would be if you have been exposed to a pathogen and then you get, let's say, the flu, and then you recover from it, you're going to have memory cells, you're going to have antibodies in your blood, you're going to be able to respond to that same threat if it comes into your body again. Artificial acquired immunity is where you get a vaccination, and that vaccination is going to give you part of the antigen the flu would have. When you get that, you're going to respond to that antigen in the same way you would if you actually acquired it if someone coughed in your face. That would be the natural acquired immunity. But you're going to produce these cells, memory cells, and you're going to activate this whole immune response. I wanted to back up to this passive acquired immunity because a baby also gets immunity from its mother's antibodies through the placenta and through breast milk. The reason why that is so important is because a baby is always with the mom. And so if a mom is exposed to something, the baby's going to be exposed to the same thing. So it makes sense that they would have the same antibodies through breast milk that the mom has in her body because she's been exposed to things that the baby would be exposed to at the same time. Another aspect of immunity is autoimmunity, and auto means self. So if we're talking about autoimmunity, we mean that the body's immune system attacks its own tissues. I'm giving you some of these examples down here of things that can be brought on through autoimmunity. And these autoimmune disorders, such as one that we looked at already, Addison's disease, if you remember we talked about that, and type 1 diabetes mellitus. You've probably heard of lupus before, and multiple sclerosis. So your body's immune system is attacking your own cells. Hypersensitivity occurs when the body's immune system fails to protect itself against foreign material. Instead, the antibodies formed irritate certain body cells. And we use the term allergen to mean the antigen that causes allergic responses. So there are some substances that you might be exposed to that would cause an allergic response, but they're not really harmful to most people, like ragweed pollen and peanuts or penicillin, an antibiotic, or insect stings. And most people aren't allergic to them, but if you are, then we call these types of antigens allergens. And they can stimulate IgE antibodies. And these antibodies bind to certain cells in the body and can then lead to that allergic reaction. If you have a really severe type of allergic reaction that is a sudden reaction, we call this anaphylactic shock if it results in a massive secretion of histamine. Remember, histamine is one of the substances produced by basophils, those white blood cells that have that purple granule. Well, histamine causes inflammation. If you have widespread inflammation, fluid is going out of your blood and into your tissues, causing that inflammation. Your blood volume then decreases because that fluid's leaving your blood. And so this could cause problems resulting from that falling blood pressure. Because of that, an injection of adrenaline or an antihistamine is needed, and a lot of times it is epinephrine or adrenaline that's needed, and that's where an EpiPen comes in, where you're giving yourself epinephrine, and what that does is it increases your heart rate and therefore increases your blood pressure and your blood volume. That's the end of this section. Please let me know if you have any questions.